Okay, so looking at my background information, as I have mentioned in previous modules, I would say, and I mentioned in our conversations here, that my school is probably in its infancy in dealing with data. We're a small school. We don't have a lot of resources to put forth. Obviously, like we're a small town in rural Kansas. We're trending older in our population, trending older in, like I said, our teachers. We're getting to the point where we're slowly moving towards um, the younger generation, but it can provide barriers when all of your stakeholders are not necessarily engaged in that process and understanding of that process. So at the outcast, I think that's one of the things that's important for me to understand. We do use that Power School, I think, that one of you had mentioned that you use as well, and it's our student information system where we can access all of our demographic data. We're able to access some of our performance data, not our state assessment data, but we're able to access our ACT data, which in our school is some of the things that we really only focus on besides our local assessments, like our formative and summative, those types of things, are really the only data that we have looked at so far in our, like I said, in the infancy of our process. And so we're able to use some of that and be able to aggregate that data, bring it together, and kind of see based upon, you know, where they're at, what their needs are, and kind of going forward. Um, and so, like I said, I would going forward have we definitely have got to be better at this. And I think I don't know if Christopher, if you were a high school teacher, but I think at the high school it's maybe a little bit more difficult to use the data, because it seems that in my conversations with my administrator, and then also my administrator at my previous school, it is a little easier to use the assessment, or not easier. There are more structural things in place for elementary teachers to use, because it's, you reading fluency, there's an easy measure for it, and maybe as opposed to math, like Chris teaches, it's about that slow progress, and especially me as a history teacher who is very content based. It's not necessarily based on those basic standards, and so that's one of the things that I'm struggling with, and so something that I'm wanting to know, or wanting to kind of figure out as I go on in my desired outcomes, is how can I broaden my scope and use of data by basically just only using things like Google Classroom, exit tickets, basing that on quiz scores, local assessments, and kind of understanding how and why and how we can use data effectively in our school, because we don't do a good job. I guess I'm looking at a place to start is something where I'm at. So, based upon the little that I have, is there any questions on Power School, or what is used in Power School, or assessment data?
Yeah. Yeah. So, oh, go ahead. No, no, no. You're fine. Go. Okay. Yeah, I had a question with the Power School. So, is that something that you like use every day? Like when I get to school, I open up my email, I open up my eSchool, and that's kind of how we do attendance and gradebook and all of that stuff is there. Is that all included when you're talking about these information systems?
Yeah, it is our all inclusive student information system. It is attendance. It is we do our lunch counts. We do our like I said, I'm able to access some performance data, emergency contact things, everything that you would think would be included, demographic information. Able to access some historic grades, which I find interesting. I'm able to see how they scored. Maybe something as a history teacher, we read a lot, we study text, and so I'm able to look at maybe if they struggled in their English language courses as a freshman or a sophomore, and they're in a junior level course, and I'm able to see some of that information and able to maybe modify text or differentiate for specific students based upon those scores, and kind of understand through that, and maybe through some pre and post tests, how I'm able to identify that. But like I said, it is a fairly all inclusive information system. It doesn't have much of the student data, or student performance data, and we kind of got to go just to the basic, our Kansas report card, those types of things for that type of data.
So I was gonna kind of more talk about your formative and summative. You kind of brushed over those, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like those are like almost our most important data sources because
Mm-hmm.
it's like right what's happening in the classroom right there. You're seeing that
Mm-hmm.
what your students already know, and then
Mm-hmm.
by the time you teach your unit,
Mm-hmm.
what they know at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So Are those in your school like set? Like, does each grade level do you guys meet as a team and talk about those pre and post assessments? Or are they individual to like your are they specific for what you make?
And that's one of the interesting things about, I don't know how large or small all of your schools are, but we are a 1A school. I have probably 18 to 22 students in the entire grade. And so I am the only content teacher for all social sciences, 9th through 12th grade. And that's one of the things I was considering thinking about as well. You're kind of in reference to your question. I would like to be able to meet with other individuals in my content area. We do have some kind of, I wouldn't call them mean. They're pretty informal, where I talk with the 5th grade teacher, or I talk with the 7th grade teacher about what they're doing and how they're pacing guides. But most all of my assessments are self-created, and they're based upon what I do and what I've seen and what I feel is best practice. They're not based upon any sort of pacing guide that we would have, like what she said in hers. But we're based upon. I have a set of those Kansas social studies, history, and government standards. There are national standards, but those are just based upon what I feel is best and what I feel, and that's why I kind of rely upon that historic data a little bit to be able to modify, and those formative assessments. Like I said, he mentioned his Google Classroom, those basic quizzes, those daily assignments, those things we put in that assessment calendar for the local assessments. Those are the things that I think I would like to use. And something that I would like to use it well, and is what I considered at my previous school, is developing a summative local assessment. There are some schools that are doing that, where they develop based upon their own what their stakeholders feel is important to that content area. You can use those perception surveys if you want for that kind of thing. What do they feel that their students need out of American history? What do they feel their students need out of American government, or whatever your course is? Because you have in all communities, even mine, even one as small as mine, you have individuals that are interested in all processes at your school. I mean, you have accountants, you have your historical societies. No matter what you are, they would be involved in that process, and so their input is very important.
How do you keep track of your formative and summative assessments for you? Do you have a place that you put that information, or track data?
Like I said, I do use the Google Classroom a considerable amount. Christopher mentioned the Google Forms. I use Google Forms a lot, because it's pretty efficient. You can get all your data, and you can store it in one place. I love the Google Drive. I think it's very effective. And I'm able to put all of my lesson plans. I'm able to put all of my documents. I'm able to put all of my if I do cultivate assessment data, I'm able to do that. And so I'm able to kind of formulate all of those things and make sure that I'm able to use them out of that tool. It is still, as Chris said, is still the click and find and make sure that but that's kind of where I hone all of my instructional tools, whether it's data or whether it's resources or whether it's lesson plans. And so that's where I kind of put those and handle those and use my tools.
I was going to ask about Google Classroom, but I see that you use it. So does your students have access to technology in the classroom and at home, or?
Yes, we are a 1-to-1 school with Chromebooks. My experience with them is they get the job done. They're not an overly expensive tool. They don't have a lot of applications that you can use. Kind of like my last school, we had MacBooks. It was obviously a wealthier school district. But the Google Chromebooks, they do have access to them. They can use them at all times. We were looking at applying for a grant. There's a school in Texas, I think it's kind of similar to what Chris was talking about, that they were able to park buses periodically throughout their community and able to put Wi-Fi hotspots on them. And so that way kids all throughout the community would be able to do that, and then they just go pick them up and pick kids up. I think that's because something that we do have. I think we don't have as high of a percentage, I think, as Chris stated. His was 55%. I think ours is about 46, 47% free and reduced. So there will be a lot of students that don't have internet access, but I think that it's something that we're able to kind of stem off, as I mentioned to Chris, that we're able to download our assignments, and we're able to modify, and sometimes I'll be able to modify assignments for students that maybe they don't need access. If it's required to have 3 online sources for a paper, maybe I'll just say, hey, you can go to the library and use 3 book sources, those types of things. It's one of the things about being in a small community is you have to get pretty inventive. And I think that's something that kind of develops in my teacher toolbox as I go.
Great.
Any more questions? So like I said, I kind of prefaced it there in the beginning, but one of the things I would like to say is ask for help is I don't really know where to start because we don't have, as I think as the article said, a real solid data infrastructure. And I think as a small school educator, I feel a little bit on my own because one, we don't evaluate data a lot due to I think our older teacher population and older community population because it's not seen as important. So that board of education, those types of things, those stakeholders, they don't understand. Or I don't want to say understand. That's pretty condescending. They don't see the value as much maybe in that process. And so how would I go about possibly even changing minds or pushing the need for data going forward?
Great question. I think since you're already using your Google Classroom and the Google Suite pretty heavily, it sounds like maybe just starting to gather that information in ways that we've learned in this class. I thought it was pretty fascinating how our professor had that Google sheet with all of the data for student 1, student 2, and it went, that'd be a big undertaking for you to just do yourself. But if you maybe start small and then maybe get a few more teachers on board and then bring it to your principal, that maybe you could kind of start and be the backer for using this data to make decisions in your classroom and for your school.
Are there other teachers that use Google Classroom that you are aware of?
We have a trending, like I said, trending older teacher population. So they're not. I think there's one other teacher that I have really kind of encouraged to use it. That does use it as well, and they make use of the PowerSchool student information system as well. But we definitely are weak on data, and that's one of the things I've spoke with my administrator about recently here this summer. Is that and his focus is on that as well as all education programs, all administrative programs are focusing that data gets and makes student achievement better. And so that's one of the things that he's a little bit hesitant to rock the boat, so to speak, as we go on. But I think that he definitely sees that as a need. So
maybe kind of go ahead. No, you're fine.
Oh, I was going to say to piggyback off of Sarah's idea, maybe just start small. Since it sounds like you're at a really small school, just going with maybe that one class of 18 kids, and just showing, just some little things that you used in your classroom to change some things. And something that we do, I'm at a bigger school, so we have like 1,200 kids. There's like 8 or 9 math teachers. So we have team drives. And in every unit, we have a folder titled Notes for Next Year. And so looking at how a unit went, some of us will give a pre-assessment and a post-assessment for a unit, and then we'll take notes in there, and then that's, help kind of shape our curriculum for the next year. And just like little things like that to show people that, hey, this is actually improving my instruction and helping out the students. That could help. I mean, starting really small.
Yeah. I think that go ahead.
Or maybe even asking your students their thoughts on using Google Classroom, kind of like a student survey, just to kind of talk to your administrator, your principal, just about how utilizing the technology more in the classroom. And it's also helpful for the students and for you as a teacher to look at their data.
And that's something that's I really like those suggestions. Something that I think that's something that's difficult is we have an old economy as well. It's an old agriculture, old farming economy. I think we have some of those barriers that Christopher talked about in his Northern Valley or Upper Valley, I don't remember which, but where they have that type of education, they have that mindset of where I'm going to come out and I'm going to work on the farm, and I don't really need what tools does Google Classroom afford me, or what tools does data afford me. But I think it's one of those things where the world is changing, and I think that I'm slowly attempting to put some of those strategies that you guys talked about in place, starting small, attempting to build a consensus around teachers, to build a consensus around some stakeholders, attempting to build relationships with community partners to try to get them to push for that data, because it can help not just in your school but in your community as well. I think that's one of what the second article basically talked about, that it's not just about education, it's about business, and small businesses can use that data to kind of help them as well. And so But unless we have anything else, I think that's it. So.
No. Great.
Alrighty. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Yes. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Nice work.